Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Door County. We're so happy to have you here on this beautiful, beautiful fall day. As Unitarian Universalists all over the world, we're accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. We affirm and promote that every person is important, that all be treated fairly and kindly, that we accept one another and encourage each other's growth, that each person must be free to search for truth, that we must protect the democratic process with our congregations and the society at large, and that we must work for a peaceful, fair, and free world, that we must care for planet Earth, our home, that we share with all other living things. Dave, could we turn the volume down just a little bit, please? Okay. If you know that those are our principles, you wonder, well, what does all that going to look like when we finally arrive? Well, you've come to the right place today. And so we welcome you to be here, and we're happy to have you. My name is Bob Lindahl, and it is my privilege to be your service leader today. We have a tradition of asking visitors and people who haven't been here for a while to stand and introduce themselves if they're comfortable. Tell us where you're from, perhaps, and whatever you'd like, or else you'd like to tell us. So please, at this time, Donna will, no, Donna won't yet. Okay. So do we have people over on this side of the room that might be wanting to, yes. Mm-hmm.
I am Mike Fordney, and this is my wife, Beth Healy. We live in Bailey's Harbor. Among other things, I'm here today along with Mariah Good to talk about the Door County Housing Partnership. Thank you for inviting us to your gathering.
Okay. Nice to have you. Anyone else on this side? Okay, over here. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else over here? Yes.
It's been a long time since I've been here. I know who I am. I'm Rob Davis. My parents were Nancy and Bob Davis, who seem to know everybody in the county. I've lived here now in retirement for 10 years. Before that in Evanston, and I think this is the best place in the world to live.
Okay, welcome. Thank you. So if there are other announcements, would you please raise your hand and Donna will bring the microphone around to different people. Does anyone have an announcement they would like to give this morning? I see Mark over here.
Hi. So I'm Mark Richards, and I'm inviting you to break out the bubble. The Wisconsin UU State Action Network is hosting a phone bank today until 8 p.m., tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., and it is a nonpartisan. It's simply an urge for people to go out and vote. And so if you want to get connected to that, let me know, and I'll get you all the information you need to know. The more people we reach out to, the better it's going to be. The more people that vote, the more democracy we have.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi, I'm Hank Wolst, and I don't know if this merits an announcement or not, but I did want to congratulate Bob on his excellent fashion sense.
Now, the next time I service lead, if we come wearing the same thing again for the third time in a row, you know, it's going to be strange. Okay.
Hi, Jerry Friedberg. For those of you who are music lovers, today at Crest in Egg Harbor at 2:00 is the last chance this season, I think. 3, I'm sorry, you're right. 3:00 to hear David Perry and Jeannie Yu.
Anyone else? Okay. Okay.
Hi, I'm Marianne O'Dowd, and you probably have heard me say this before. It's Third Sunday. And just a reminder that we are collecting today for our 3 partners, our 3 community partners, Northern Door Children's Center, the Housing Partnership of Door County, and the Climate Change Coalition of Door County. And if you've been paying attention to the sign out in the lobby, you'll see that we, in a few short months, are at $7,500 raised for our partners. So let's keep that momentum going. And I'd like to call up Mike Fordney at this time and Mariah. They're going to give you a little bit of information about the housing partnership and hand it over to them.
Good morning. Once again, my name is Mike Fordney, and I think you've met Mariah Good in the past. The UUC Fellowship has been a very strong supporter of the Door County Housing Partnership, and we are so honored to be picked as part of the 3 groups that Marianne just described for your fundraising, for your tithing. I'm not sure what you all call it, but we greatly support it. Mariah was here at the inception, including the initial meetings with the UUC, so I'm going to ask her just to recap that history.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. Some of you may not recall the Door County Housing Partnership actually grew out of the Interfaith Prosperity Coalition, which I think started 6 or 7 years ago. And that was a group of Northern Door churches that had gotten together to try and address matters of poverty. And they decided that housing was the one thing they thought they could possibly have an impact on. So the Door County Housing Partnership grew out of that, and UU folks were involved in that. And the UU, I think, was one of our first donors as well to help us do a video of folks who were having struggles with finding housing. At the moment, we are 5.5 years old now officially as far as our incorporated status as a nonprofit. We are finishing our 6th home. That home is our first one in Sister Bay. So we're very excited to actually have our first project in Northern Door. And it just so happens that our buyer for this 6th home is actually a Northern Door Children's Center childcare worker. So we have a childcare household moving in, and they have 2 very small children of their own as well. After that home, we do have 9 more lots in Sister Bay. So that's what we would really like to focus on for the next handful of years. And as somebody said, it's going to take money over there. Because we work under a homeownership model where we're able to sell the homes for far less than they actually cost, so that the buyer can actually have the home be affordable, and then their equity is limited along the way so that the next buyer can buy it at an affordable price also. So that's the gist of how we work, and I'll turn it over to Mike. And I think we're both going to be here afterward to answer more questions too.
Thanks again. Yeah, Mariah, thank you for covering that. So we're building our sixth house. It's the end of the year, and like a lot of nonprofits, we are going through a fundraising season. And so our timing working with you all is incredibly perfect. We will be in the coffee area later to talk about the details. We're all volunteers. The value of the homes stay affordable literally forever under our model. So it's a very effective way to provide affordable workforce housing in the community. So we look forward to speaking with you during the coffee hour after the gathering. Thank you so much.
So just a few other items before we begin our service today. Please remember to silence your phones if you haven't done so already. If you're having difficulty hearing at any time, raise your hand and Dave will be able to catch that and do something with the microphone. And then following today's service, please remember that we always have a coffee time in the gathering room. And after 10 or 15 minutes, you'll hear the chimes ring, which is your invitation to either continue drinking coffee or to come back over to this corner of the sanctuary for a talk back with Terry about today's message. We welcome Terry Good today as our speaker. He's a familiar face to us. And Terry is a philosopher. He's a professor. He teaches popular, long-standing philosophy classes at the Clearing during the winter and at Bjorklanden during the summer. And I think the rest of the year you golf and he gets into other trouble around the county. At our fellowship, he's served as a speaker, been tinkering around also in the program committee, finance committee, and in web development. So again, we're glad to have you, and Terry's a good friend to many here too. So now before Terry delves into our issues at hand today, I thought it would be helpful if we tried to define just what a philosopher is, to try to separate what's a philosopher as opposed to some other things. Okay, so what's the difference between a philosopher, an existentialist, and Frank Sinatra? And so let's try to figure out which one of these is Terry Good. Okay, for a philosopher, to be is to do. For an existentialist, to do is to be. For Frank Sinatra, it's doobie-doobie-doo. That must have been around for a while, I guess. Okay. Okay. So now we'll go begin our service with our chalice lighting. And the chalice lighting has been written by a UU minister. Should we focus on transforming ourselves, on the belief that doing so will lead to transforming the world? Or should we focus on transforming the world on the belief that doing so will lead to transforming ourselves? And now if you could stand, please, in body or spirit. Let's go to hymn number 123 and remain standing then for the unison affirmation and the doxology. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the purrings of compassion. blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the land, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. We gather together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within a caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, in every land, by every tongue. You may be seated. Time now for joys and concerns. Our joys and concern time gives us the chance to experience living together, what our lives mean. By sharing our joys, we can both spread joy, and by sharing our burdens, we can ease our own burden by sharing with others. So Donna will bring the microphone around, and I would remind you that if you mention someone else's name, be sure you have their permission to do so, because we are going online here. Donna, does anyone have an announcement, their joy or concern they would like to make? Is someone happy?
Lynn Lees, I'll say I'm happy. And even though I didn't get her permission, I'm going to congratulate our member and friend, Mona Simpson. She had solar panels installed on her sweet, lovely home in Cedarburg this week.
Wonderful.
My 9-year-old granddaughter, Ivy B, turned 10 yesterday. She calls me every morning at 7:30 to say hi and check on me.
Yeah, me again. What a joy to have been part last night of a ribbon cutting at Door County's newest cultural center, which is Muse in Sturgeon Bay, where we had wonderful music, wonderful company. The guest speaker was Jamie Bernstein, the daughter of Leonard Bernstein, who did a wonderful presentation of about 35 minutes. Saw several of you there, and I think you'd agree it was just an absolutely wonderful, wonderful occasion.
Okay.
Hi, yeah, I'm good. I should have mentioned this during the announcement, but I assume somebody else was going to. Be sure and watch 60 Minutes tonight because Door County is featured. We are the only county in the swing states that has picked the president in this century.
Every time. Okay, thank you. And joy for me, first, I think I gave Ruth Kosmanik here the wrong time limit to get to the fellowship, because Ruth is staying at our house for about 2 weeks while Ruth is from Geneva, Illinois, and down near us, has become a good friend, and she'll be staying with our dog Lindy for the time that we're gone to the Grand Canyon together. So we welcome Ruth with us today. So now it's time for our offertory. We give you, we'd encourage you to give generously. Remember that today we are taking, once again, the offering for our community partners. And if any offering that comes in today that is not labeled for something else, a pledge and so forth, will go toward our community partnership. So we encourage you to give generously or go to our website and you can do the same at uufdc.org. Okay. Thank you, Jason. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. So now we'll begin our moment of quiet. As we begin our moment of quiet today, we'll be asking you to focus by listening to a Buddhist chant. So for our readings before our message this morning, first we'll have a reading coming from Aristotle and second from Kant. Good character is that, Aristotle said, good character is that quality which makes one dependable, whether being watched or not, which makes one truthful when it's to one's advantage, maybe to be a little less than truthful, which makes one courageous when faced with great obstacles, which endows one with the firmness of wise self-discipline. According to Kant, act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of some other, never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. Sapere audi, have courage to use your own reason. Brother Terry.
Morning. Thank you to the fellowship for having me today. It's always an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you, Brother Bob, for your service leadership and for our longtime friendship. I have to give you credit for doing this year after year, bro. It must get harder and harder to say something nice about me. Thank you, Jason, and the a cappella group for your lovely music. Today, the music may cover for a marginal message, but at least it's a message about margins. That one was for Hank. I begin by noting that you can be assured that you are in a Unitarian house of worship today. You know this, of course, because there is a trolley on the altar and not a crucifix. I wish more religions followed this important lead. As Unitarians always say, it doesn't matter where you are on your journey as long as you're on the right track. The significance of the trolley will become clear later in the message. Okay, to today's message. Last October, I spoke to the fellowship about post-structuralism and its influence on Unitarianism. I'm sure you all remember it well and have spent the last 12 months religiously studying it. That's a good thing, because today I will be addressing an important question that came out of that talk. During the talk back, my friend Cindy Steele asked a question that prompted the development of today's message. So what was the question? First, some background. Last year, I suggested that the Unitarian Universalist principles, which embody important imperatives, are significant, but those imperatives have limits when put into practice. For example, the Unitarian first principle proclaims the inherent worth and dignity of every person. In practice, this has become all are welcome here. But clearly, fascists, Nazis, the KKK, and other extremists are not welcome here. While I made that point, I did not explain the necessity for limits on imperatives in practice, nor how those limits are determined. This led to Cindy's important question. So, who decides the limits, why, and how? Today, I will attempt to answer that question in true philosophical fashion by making it much more complicated. The answer to who decides is the easy part. We do. But we need the help of philosophers. Who else would you ask? So first, I will outline 4 major philosophical theories that tell us the source of right and wrong. I do this because those theories provide the basis for the moral imperatives that are derived from them. Thus, they tell us where we need to look if we are going to put limits on imperatives in practice. Then I will explain the need for those limits, thus the why part of the question. This will be illustrated by a famous meme, one I suspect you are aware of, but I hope to provide some surprises about it. Finally, I will suggest a framework for setting margins on moral imperatives in practice, the how part of the question, one that combines elements of 2 important theories, those of Aristotle and Kant. Overall, my aim is to lay the groundwork for a theory about improving moral practice. Okay, so what is the source of right and wrong? Think in terms of actions, human actions, the things we assess to be right and wrong. What is it about human actions that makes them right or wrong? Not which specific actions are right or wrong, but the source of it. The traditional answers to this question, what makes right acts right, are what philosophers call meta-ethical theories. It's important to note that they are not themselves moral theories. They do not directly express moral imperatives. Rather, they are philosophical theories that tell us where to look for what makes actions right or wrong. Here then are the 4 most famous and most important meta-ethical theories developed in the Western tradition. Please hold your applause until all have been presented. First, the rightness of an action is a property of the action itself. This is known as naturalism, sometimes called realism. Plato was responsible for it 2,500 years ago. Naturalism says that moral actions have natural properties that make them right or wrong. Just like being round is a natural property of a ball, like this ball. Who could possibly object to that? Okay, I know, Unitarians. And the fact is, Unitarians would not be mistaken here, at least with respect to right and wrong, because no one has ever been able to identify the natural properties of actions that make them right or wrong. More on this important point later in the message. By the way, this ball is also blue, but that is not one of its natural properties. After all, it could have been yellow. Philosophers are so observant. Second, the rightness of an action is a product of the consequences of the action. This is known as consequentialism, more commonly called utilitarianism. The British philosophers Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill were the principal proponents of the view in the 19th century. It is far and away the most popular meta-ethical theory. You have all appealed to it when you ask, but how many people will be helped or hurt by doing that? Or what benefit will come from doing that? These are reasonable questions, but there are unintended consequences of our actions, even those that are right. And this presents a serious problem for utilitarianism. Moreover, there is a backstory here about Bentham, in case you are leaning heavily in this direction and have already decided that utilitarianism is the answer to the question about the source of right and wrong. I will hold the backstory for the talk back in order to guarantee your attendance. But I ask that you not put all of your meta-ethical eggs in the consequentialist utilitarian basket without additional information. Third, the rightness of an action is a product of the intent of the agent performing the action. This meta-ethical theory is known as intentionalism, which was introduced by Immanuel Kant, the great 18th century German philosopher. Kant argued that the measure of what makes an action right or wrong is grounded in the will of the agent to universalize the maxim, i.e. the principle of the action. Kant identified the overriding principle as the categorical imperative. Always treat people as an end in themselves, never as a means to an end. Brilliant. And I note, conceived long before the Unitarian Universalist first principle ever existed. I admire Kant. The basis of Western law is rooted in his theory. Intent is the measure of guilt or innocence in our legal system. But while I think Kant was on to something important here, his view is both too broad and too narrow. Too broad because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So said Saint Bernard of Clairvaux way back in 1125 AD. Too narrow because sometimes bad intentions have good outcomes, thus the importance of the silver lining. Fourth, the rightness of an action is a product of it being performed by a virtuous agent. In short, we can identify the rightness of an action if it was done by one acting out of virtue. This is Aristotle's theory, known as virtuism, presented in the Nicomachean Ethics, also 2,500 years ago. And Aristotle even had a rule about how to ensure it in practice. Always seek the golden mean, not to be confused with the golden rule. As Aristotle argued, always seek the balance between the extremes. Given a choice, don't choose black, don't choose white, choose gray. Well, not 50 shades of gray, just the middle shade. Okay, that's a lot to digest. We need some philosophical assessment before going on. Clearly, the above four theories cannot all be true. The rightness or wrongness of an action cannot be a product of all four, but the theories at least define the possibilities for the source of the rightness or wrongness of human actions. Either actions in and of themselves, or the consequences of actions, or the intent of the agents performing the actions, or the virtue of the acting agents are the source of right and wrong. These four theories set the standard for the basis of moral attribution in the Western tradition and have led to the development of important moral imperatives. By the way, there are three other historical metaethical theories, but they have been rejected by almost all contemporary philosophers. I will identify them in the talk back if you really want to know about them. Okay, to address the problem of margins on moral imperatives and provide an exercise for illustrating the need for them, I now introduce a meme, one you are perhaps familiar with, the famous trolley problem. Finally, the reason for the trolley on the altar. After describing the meme, I will then take you on a short trolley ride to look at how the four metaethical theories just presented would address the problem. This will expose the need for limits on moral imperatives. Here then is the trolley problem in its original form, albeit the condensed Cliff Notes version. There is a runaway trolley barreling down a track. Ahead on the track are 5 people tied up and unable to move. The trolley is headed straight for them. You, or the switchman, are standing on a bridge above the track next to a lever, and you can control the direction of the trolley. If you pull a lever, the trolley will switch to a side track. You notice that there's only one person on the side track. You have 2 options. A, do nothing, in which case the trolley will kill 5 people on the main track. Or B, pull a lever, diverting the trolley to the side track where it will kill just 1 person. What is the right thing to do? How is one to decide, and why? First, some interesting historical background about the trolley problem. Philippa Foot, the famous female English philosopher, introduced the trolley problem into the philosophical literature in 1967. Interestingly enough, Foot offered her argument as part of an analysis on the debate about abortion. I will save that one for my UU message next year. Subsequently, the trolley problem has gained great notoriety. The American philosopher Judith Jarvis Thomson analyzed it extensively. In her 1976 article, she initiated what is now the current literature on the trolley problem as a subject in its own right. And Thomson is now more famous for the problem than Foot. Characteristic of this literature are colorful and increasingly absurd scenarios in which a sacrificed person is instead pushed onto the track as a weight to stop the trolley. Then his organs are harvested to save transplants patients, or he is killed in a more indirect way that complicates the chain of causation and responsibility. And so it goes in the world of moral decision-making, at least among philosophers. I shall not address these alternatives directly today, but I do note that there is a trolley game if you want to purchase the scenarios. It's available at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and elsewhere. Even right here. Here is the trolley game. Lynn Lees, please take note in case the UU group wants to borrow it. I also note that there were earlier forms of trolley scenarios long before Philippa Foot's 1967 introduction. Here is one of particular interest. Frank Chapman Sharp, an early 20th century philosopher, introduced a type of trolley problem in a moral questionnaire given to his undergraduate students as part of an ethics experiment at the University of Wisconsin in 1905. In Sharp's variation, there was no sidetrack, and the lone individual to be sacrificed was a switchman's own child. This is a much more serious ethical problem and predates the modern philosophical discussion of the trolley problem by more than 60 years. Okay, now to the task of understanding how each of the 4 metaethical theories outlined above might answer the trolley problem. Then it will be up to you, as good Unitarians, to decide which of the answers is correct and to see what your choice means about limits or margins on moral directives in practice. So first, naturalism. Naturalism has a real problem with the trolley problem. If you do nothing, 5 people die. If you pull the lever, 1 person dies. This is a lose-lose situation for naturalism because there are no known natural properties of either action, killing many people or killing just 1, that are intrinsically right or wrong. This was brilliantly argued by the famous English philosopher G.E. Moore in his 1903 book Principia Ethica, before anyone had ever heard of the trolley problem. Moore introduced what he called the naturalistic fallacy, arguing that any proposition of the form moral action A has properties 1 through n, but action A is not right, must be a contradiction if the proposed properties define moral rightness. But, and this is the important philosophical point, no contradictions arise given any theory that attempts to define or identify the natural properties of moral actions. Talk about limits on moral imperatives. Moore's argument shows that naturalism is so limited in itself that it cannot even get off the ground. And then to utilitarianism. You know what they would do to solve the trolley problem. Move the lever, switch the track, save the 5 people, go for the best consequences. The greatest good for the greatest number, which is the defining moral principle derived from utilitarianism. But this is easier said than done. Who are the 5 people on the main track? Does it matter? Who is the 1 person on the side track? Does it matter? Clearly, these are important questions and suggest that we need limits or margins on the greatest good for the greatest number. We need to understand the circumstances, the context of the situation. The utilitarian-based imperative calling for action that brings about the greatest good for the greatest number will not do in and of itself. Hitler is one of the 5 on the main track. It is not difficult to justify taking out all 5. Add Trump and the justification is even easier. However, Jesus on either track, we got to talk even if you're a Unitarian. So, on to intentionalism. This solution argues for the need to look at the intent of the person controlling the switch. This is a very important idea, but Kant's deontology, which requires strict adherence to principle, to universalizing principles of action based upon intention, is not workable in and of itself, as much as we might want to endorse it. It too requires limits or margins, consideration of context and circumstance. A mother with a starving child has every right to steal food to feed her child, even if one must never steal. And a woman who has been raped and finds herself pregnant has every right to an abortion, even if one must never take a human life. Not to give away my message for next year. Turning then to virtuism. This theory would have the switchman look for a middle ground, one that eliminates the extremes, like putting something on the track to stop the trolley, perhaps pushing the fat man standing next to him onto the track. This is a famous solution to the trolley problem. Perhaps dropping a boulder on the track, one that is accessible to the switchman. This is a modified but more humane version of the fat man proposal. Perhaps jumping on the track oneself. This is the ultimate moral solution, but it means deciding, should I risk my life to save the life of another? If so, why? If not, why not? This is the most important ethical decision you may ever have to make, albeit one you hope you never do have to make. It is the ultimate test of character, but more important, it exemplifies in the strongest possible way the need for limits on moral imperatives in practice. Okay, that was even more to digest, perhaps too much. So time for some final philosophical assessment. Does any of this get us closer to a solution, closer to a reason for and a way to limit moral imperatives in practice? It seems to me that virtuism is on an important track here. No pun intended, Hank. What's right seems related to actions done out of virtue. And as indicated earlier, Aristotle had a rule for achieving it in practice. always choose the middle ground, the difference between the extremes. For example, courage is the difference between cowardice and foolhardiness. So everyone should choose that middle ground. Don't be a coward and don't be a fool, because the middle ground, being courageous, is the virtuous path. Aristotle went even further. He argued for balancing the extremes, doing so by always leaning toward one or the other extreme to find what he called the apex of the virtue. One must be fearful in order to be courageous. One must also be foolhardy in order to be courageous. But one must be prudent in assessing the extent in each direction to ensure that we do not overreact in either direction. This is the true middle ground Aristotle so famously argued for, the true golden means, the way to the better angels of our nature. I find Aristotle's theory important, but missing a dimension. Being virtuous does not occur in a vacuum. It requires intention. And if so, that brings Kant and intentionalism back into the equation. I think we need further research on the relationship between virtue and intentions. I believe that combining virtuism and intentionalism provides direction for an answer to our problem. We need to assess the mandate, act on intentions only if they are virtue-driven. Okay, so what does that mean, and what does it come down to in actual practice? For real moral decision-making, it means avoiding the extremes. It means being prudent in assessing that avoidance. It means evaluating all courses of action. It means asking others, what would you do in this situation? And given the answers, factoring them into your decision. This is, of course, much easier said than done, particularly when we must usually act on the spot without time to deliberate or to ask others for moral advice. Thus, the long-term solution is education, teaching people how to be virtuous so that one has a store or a reservoir of virtuous actions to call upon. There is no short-term answer except learning from our mistakes. Having rules that we adopt, that is, moral imperatives that we accept that are immutable in practice but immutable in principle but interpretive in practice, and teaching others, including each new generation, to accept these imperatives until they don't work, which will be because new and better ways to assess those moral situations have been uncovered, and then to adopt those new ways, the ones uncovered by those mistakes. This may be weaker than you want to hear. I suspect much weaker, because it calls for a prolonged practice over a lifetime, one of teaching, listening, and constantly learning. But it is a broad framework for going forward, for improving moral practice, and I believe it can be accomplished without a retreat to moral relativism. So to conclude, and take us back to the beginning of the message, the traditional Unitarian principles clearly embody universalizable moral imperatives. Belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person means everyone is welcome here. And that means acceptance of others, encouragement of others, and respect for others, all of which are virtues. But the imperative has margins, limits, like all moral imperatives in practice. It needs consideration of circumstance and context. The proposal to act on universal principles only if driven by virtuous intention and tempered by consideration of context and situation is a model for moral decision-making in practice. One I believe to be progressive, but one to be tested and replaced when a better proposal comes along. Something for you to work on for next year. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. I hope you found the message thought-provoking, and I look forward to the talk back, where as promised, the dark side of Jeremy Bentham will be revealed. I know you cannot wait.
Thank you. I won't try to follow that too. So let's rise again in body or spirit and sing hymn number 345 together. With joy we claim the growing light, advancing thought and widening view, the larger freedom clearer sight, which from the old unfold the new. With wider view come loftier goal, with fuller light, more good to see. With freedom from earth's control, with knowledge deeper, reverence peace. Thank you. So for our closing words today, we become better humored as we grow older. We improve by experience. When young, we think of ourselves of great consequence. As we advance in life, we learn to think of ourselves of no consequence and little things of great importance. And so we become more patient and better pleased. All good humor and complacence are acquired. By degrees, we learn to serve others and to prefer others, and that is what it will ultimately produce, the greatest good. In other words, the true measure of a person is how they treat someone who can do them absolutely no good.